started. Alrighty, so tonight we have Chapter 7 and Chapter 8, both on regulations. And okay, we got this going. Okay. License, regulations, and privileges. Section 1, License Rules. Licensing authority for the amateur radio is the Federal Communications Commission. The FCC rules are published in Part 97 of Title 47, Code of Federal Regulations, usually referred to as Part 97. Why is there ham radio in Part 97.1? The first part is for providing emergency communications capabilities, advancement of the art and science of radio, and advancement of communication and technical skills of the radio, and to provide hang on, I gotta move this out of the way so I can read it. Provide a trained reservoir of operators, technicians, and electronics experts, and to promote and enhance international goodwill. Some definitions. Amateur service, meaning no pecuniary interest, private and personal and non-commercial use only. An amateur operator is the person holding authorization or the license to operate an amateur radio station. An amateur station is the equipment capable of transmitting on frequencies authorized for the amateur service. The amateur license. There's no age limit or citizenship restrictions. One exception, though, is for foreign representatives. And the license actually contains two parts. The first part is the operator license, and the second part is the station license or the actual call sign. There are 3 levels of operator privileges: technician, general, and amateur extra. Licensing examinations are done by volunteer examiners who are affiliated with volunteer examiner coordinators or VECs. And there's preparation and studying for the content is the question pools that we're studying in the book. Taking the exam. It's a proctored exam, meaning that somebody will be monitoring. There's 3 VEs that'll be monitoring, a minimum of 3 VEs that are monitoring. Sometimes there's more depending on the situation, but a minimum of 3 VEs for proctoring the exam. And it will be a multiple choice, A, B, C, or D. And the fee that you have to pay is going for the paperwork for the VEs to submit all of the paperwork to the VECs. License term and renewal. The license is free, but they're just past, they announced that they were going to start charging $35, but they haven't started that up yet. But it sounds like maybe, from what I heard, it was either June or July that they were going to start charging the $35. But it is good for 10 years. And you have a renewable period within 90 days of the expiration date. And some personal identification form is required. Your tax ID or your social security number, your current mailing address, and the federal registration number. So there is one other thing. The FCC is now starting to require that everyone has an individual email address that you keep current, just the same as your mailing address because they send everything now through the email. The responsibilities of licensure is to prevent unauthorized operation of your station and to provide personal information as required and keep a current mailing address on file, and now also a current email address on file is also going to be required. And then make your station available for FCC inspection upon request. The FCC license website, or ULS. Here's the address. Okay. We'll take a look at that later after these reviews. You can register online for accessing your license information, and you can make changes to your address or other information, contact stuff, and that's also the website to renew your license and search for other station information. Okay, practice questions. Which of the following is a purpose of the amateur radio service as stated in the FCC rules and regulations? One of the things is advancing the skills in the technical and communication phases of the radio art. Which agency regulates and enforces the rules for the amateur radio service in the United States? Correct answer is the FCC. What is the FCC Part 97 definition of a beacon? A beacon is an amateur station transmitting communications for the purposes of observing propagation or related experimental activities. What may result when correspondence from the FCC is returned as undeliverable because the grantee failed to provide and maintain a correct mailing address with the FCC? Revocation of the station license or suspension of the operator license. And that soon will be changing for email addresses too. What is the normal term for an FCC issued primary station or operator amateur radio license grant? The normal term is 10 years. What is the grace period following the expiration of an amateur license within which the license may be renewed?
2 years.
2 years is correct. How soon after passing your license, how soon after passing examination for your first amateur radio license may you operate the transmitter on an amateur service frequency? So when you pass,
After you're listed in the database.
correct. As soon as your operator or station license grant appears in the FCC license database. If your license has expired and is still within the allowable grace period, may you continue to operate a transmitter on a amateur radio service frequencies?
No.
No, transmitting is not allowed until the FCC database shows that your license has been renewed. Correct. For which license classes are new licenses currently available from the FCC?
All three.
all three, technician, general, and amateur extra. The novice, the advanced are no longer available. When must the station licensee make the station and its records available for FCC inspection?
Whenever they want to see them.
Correct. At any time upon request by an FCC representative. Section 2, the privileges. What can you do with a technician class license? What are your power privileges? Your power privileges is a maximum of 1,500 watts peak envelope power, or PEP. But don't use excessive power for the purpose. Use only the required power for making your contact. Some special cases where power is restricted. 200 watts on 80, 40, 15, and 10 meters, and 50 watts on the 219 to 220 megahertz. And then see section 97.313 for other restrictions. And then what can you do with a technician class license? Here's the frequency privileges and also the formula for converting the band into frequencies. So the band is equal to 300 divided by the frequency in megahertz. So over here we have the 6 meter band is 50 to 54 megahertz. 2 meters is 144 to 148 megahertz. 1.25 meters has two areas, the 219 to 220 and then the 222 to 225. And then the UHF 70 centimeters is 420 to 450. 33 meters is 902 to 928. 23 meters is 1,240 to 1,300 megahertz. 13 centimeters has two areas on it also, the 2,300 to 2,310, and then 2390 to 2450. I'll show you the ARRL band plan, color band plan, and where you can download it in a little bit. So the emission privileges you can do with your technician class license is CW or Morse code. You can do data, image such as television fast scan and slow scan. MCW is tone modulated CW. You can do phone, which is speech or voice. You could do pulse, RTTY, spread spectrum, and of course test transmissions containing no information. Primary and secondary allocations. Some authorized amateur frequencies are shared. Primary users and secondary users. Secondary users must avoid interfering with the users of the primary service. Band plans is a voluntary arrangement that applies under normal band loading conditions. And here's an example of the 10 meters. And again, I'll show you the band plan in color so you can see all of the areas. Frequency coordinators are elected by local or regional amateurs, and the repeaters are approved by the coordinators are called coordinated. FCC considers frequency coordination good amateur practice, and groups that help allocate repeater channels to minimize interference. And in our area of Washington, it's Western Washington Amateur Repeater Association, or WWARA, and I'll show that later in the along with the band plans. All right, some more practice questions. Which of the following entities recommends transmit and receive channels and other parameters for auxiliary and repeater stations? Volunteer frequency coordinators recognized by local amateurs. Who selects a frequency coordinator? That would be amateur operators in a local or regional area whose stations are eligible to be repeater or auxiliary stations. Which frequency is within the 6-meter amateur band? 6 meters is 52.525 megahertz. Which amateur band are you using when your station is transmitting on 146.52 megahertz?
So 2-meter band.
You're on the 2-meter band, yep. Just have to memorize some of these numbers, get used to them. What is the limitation for emissions on the frequencies between 219 and 220 megahertz?
Is that data?
Fixed digital messaging forwarding systems only. Yep. On which HF bands does a technician class operator have phone privileges?
It's just the 10-meter one.
10-meter band only. Yep. Which of the following VHF and UHF frequency ranges are limited to CW only? Those are the lower parts, 50 megahertz to 50.1 megahertz, and the 144.0 to 144.1, the very, very lowest end of the two bands, 6 meters and 2 meter. Which of the following is a result of the fact that the amateur radio service is secondary in all or portions of some amateur bands, such as portions of the 77 centimeter band? U.S. amateurs may find non-amateur stations in those portions and must avoid interfering with them. So we are sometimes the secondary operators. So you might find other activity there. Which of the following HF bands have frequencies available to the technician class operator for RTTY and data transmissions? Ten-meter band, you can do RTTY and data transmissions. What is the maximum peak envelope power output for technician class operators using their assigned portions of the HF bands? For HF, what is your maximum power? That would be 200 watts. What is a band plan beyond the privileges established by the FCC? That is a voluntary guideline for using different modes or activities within an amateur band. What term describes an amateur station that is transmitting and receiving on the same frequency? When you're transmitting and receiving on the same frequency, that is simplex. Where may SSB phone be used in amateur bands above 50 megahertz? At least in some portion of all of the bands above 50 megahertz, you'll have a small portion where you can do single sideband. Section number 3, the international rules. International Telecommunication Union, or ITU, has 3 different regions. Regions 1, 2, and 3. And as you can see, our section is Region 2, although some Pacific areas are in Region number 3. International Operating Authorization is reciprocal operating authority, an international amateur radio permit, and CEPT licensing is required. And the ARRR website has additional information when you are internationally operating. And there's the web address. You must comply with the host country regulations, and you may operate from any U.S. flagged vessels, but the host country's rules apply when in territorial waters. And contacts with other countries must be allowed by that country and by the U.S. It's very rare, however, for any contacts to be prohibited. Alrighty, practice questions. What is the International Telecommunications Union? The ITU is a United Nations agency for information and communication technology issues. What types of international communications is an FCC licensed amateur radio station permitted to make? Only communications incidental to the purposes of amateur radio service and remarks of a personal character. When are you allowed to operate your amateur station in a foreign country? When the foreign country authorizes it. From which of the following locations may an FCC licensed amateur station transmit? From any vessel or craft located in international waters and documented or registered in the United States. With which countries are FCC licensed amateur radio stations prohibited from exchanging communications? Any country whose administration has notified the International Telecommunications Union that it objects to such communications. Which of the following VHF/UHF frequency ranges are limited to CW only? CW only are the 2 lower parts of the 6 meter and 2 meter, 50 megahertz to 50.1 megahertz, and 144 to 144.1 megahertz. Which of the following is a result of the fact that the amateur radio service is secondary in all or portions of some amateur bands, such as portions of the 70 centimeters? We'll find that U.S. amateurs may find non-amateur stations in those portions and must avoid interfering with them because we are the secondary users. Which of the following HF bands have frequencies available to technician class operators for RTTY and data transmissions? Your only band that you can operate as a technician is the 10 meter band. What is the maximum peak envelope power output for technician class operators using their assigned portions of the HF band?
200 watts.
200 watts is correct. Except for some specific restrictions, what is the maximum peak envelope power output for technician class operators using frequencies above 30 megahertz? Ooh, I heard a click there. 1500 watts is correct. Above 30 megahertz. How many operator primary station license grants may be held by one person?
One.
One is correct. You can only have one. What is proof of possession of an FCC grant issued operator primary license grant?
Listed in the database.
Correct. The control operator's primary station's license must appear in the FCC ULS Consolidated Licensee Database. What is the International Telecommunications Union, or ITU? They are the United Nations Agency for Information and Communication Technology issues. What types of international communications is an FCC licensed amateur radio station?
Take the battery.
Go without. Okay, I'll mute this one. Yeah, I guess my batteries died, so I'll try it this way. Sorry. Thought I'd charge these up. And it won't let me turn it on. That's the weird thing. Before it let me turn it on.
Must really be dead.
Okay. Let me turn the volume up on this one now. Sorry.
You're good.
Okay. Okay, what types of international communications is an FCC amateur radio station permitted to make? Amateur communications incidental to the purposes of the radio service and remarks of a personal character. When are you allowed to operate your amateur station in a foreign country? When a foreign country authorizes it. From which of the following locations may an FCC licensed amateur station transmit? From any vessel or craft located in the international waters and documented
or registered in the United States. With which countries are FCC licensed amateur radio stations prohibited from exchanging communications? From any country whose administration has notified the International Telecommunications Union, ITU, that it objects to such communications. And that's the end of Module 7A. Let me pull up 7B. There's 7B. So this is the second part of Chapter 7. Second part, 7B, is all about call signs. Call signs is your radio name. All amateur call signs have a prefix and a suffix. The prefix indicates the country of license, and the suffix indicates a specific licensee. The prefix is generally 2 or 3 letters and numbers assigned by the ITU. The suffix contains 1 or more letters. Call signs. U.S. call signs begin with K, N, W, and AA through AL. 10 U.S. call sign districts are indicated by a 0 in the prefix, and all of ours are in 7 area. California is 6. There's the 0, the 5, and for you down in Florida, you get number 4, 9, 8, 3, 2, and 1. Pacific and Caribbean possessions have their own special prefixes. Oh, and I forgot. Alaska is KL7 and Hawaii is KH6. U.S. call sign types for amateurs. You'll find 1x1s, 1x2s, meaning a letter, a number, and then a letter, or a 1x2 is a letter, number, and then 2 letters, or a 2x1, or a 2x2, or a 1x3, or a 2x3. Confusing. 1x1 is usually for special events, and the remaining types are group A through D, and is assigned by the license class. Indicators are added to the call sign following a slash or a word such as portable. Portable is when you're operating away from your primary station location. Mobile, aeronautic mobile, maritime mobile, and I've even heard bicycle mobile. And then you have upgrade indicators such as AG for when you upgrade to a general, or AE, or KT. I don't know what the KT is. Haven't seen that one. I have seen the AE though. Choosing your call sign. You can get vanity call signs. My call sign KE7JIM is a vanity call sign. And you can search for those when they're available, and it's like getting a vanity license plate. You can pick any call sign that's authorized for your license class. Technicians can have 2x3 or Group D, or a 1x3 Group C calls. And you can look at the ARRL vanity-call-signs for more information. Choosing your call sign. Special event call signs are 1x1, and they are reserved via administrators and you can request those at the ARRL website or special-event-call signs, and are for club calls, and you must have a valid club, and application is by the club's trustee. And you can apply at ARRL club-call-signs. All right, practice questions. Which of the following is a valid call sign for a technician class amateur radio station? That would be the 1x3, a K1XXX. Who may select a desired call sign under the vanity call sign rules? Any licensed amateur. It's just like requesting a vanity license plate. And that is the end of Module 7B. Very quick, very short. So we are done with Chapter 7. Any questions on Chapter 7? It was really short. But so is Chapter 8. Okay. So Chapter 8, Section 8. We'll jump right in, and it's Section 8A is control operators, station identification, and third-party communications. A control operator. Control operator is the amateur licensee responsible for making sure transmissions comply with the FCC rules. The FCC requires that transmissions are made only under the control of a licensed operator, designated by the station licensee, and must have a valid FCC-issued amateur radio license or have a reciprocal operating permission. Stations must operate within the authorization of the control operator's license, and the control operator must be present at the control point of the station. Designated by the station licensee and is assumed to be the station licensee unless otherwise documented. Whenever the station controls are operated, not necessarily with the physical transmitter, the control operator must be able to assert control of the transmitter. And the control point can be at the transmitter or linked to the transmitter. And control by a circuit or a computer is also allowed. Guest operations. Non-licensed people can make transmissions, but only when the control operator is present. The control operator is solely responsible for the station operation. For licensed guest operators, both the control operator and the guest ham are responsible for the station operation. Station identification. All transmissions must be identified. State the call sign every 10 minutes during and at the end of the communication. Use phonetics on voice modes. And sometimes you'll use tactical calls, but you always identify with your FCC code every 10 minutes. And you can have licensed guests. Miscellaneous ID rules. A repeater must also identify using the same 10-minute rule. And you can listen, it'll be a voice or a CW at 20 words per minute or less. There's a mix in the Seattle area of both CW and voice ones. And the satellites and ISS have special rules. And you might hear special event calls like a club call or a control operator call given once per hour. Third-party communications. Third-party communications are transmissions on behalf of an unlicensed entity. It could mean actually speaking on the air, or it could mean passing a message on behalf of a third party. Two situations with different rules: within the U.S. and communication that crosses international borders. Third party within the U.S. There's no special rules. Just make sure that the message is non-commercial in nature. Third party across borders. Third party agreements with U.S. must exist. Check for current third party agreements from the ARRR website or FCC resources if you're in doubt. Most agreements are within ITU region number 2, which is our region. This includes contest operation, and you must identify with both stations' call signs. Practice questions. When may an amateur station transmit without on-the-air identification? When transmitting signals to control a model aircraft. That's the only time. When is an amateur station permitted to transmit without a control operator? Never. You must be in control of the station. Who may be the control operator of a station communicating through an amateur satellite or space station? Any amateur whose license privileges allows them to transmit on a satellite uplink frequency. Who must designate the station control operator? That is the station licensee, and usually that's one and the same. We have our station licensee and we're the control operator. What determines the transmitting privileges of an amateur station? That is the class of operator license held by the control operator. What is an amateur station control point? The control point is the location at which the control operator function is performed. When the control operator is not the station licensee, who is responsible for the proper operation of the station? That would be the control operator, and the station licensee are equally responsible. Who does the FCC presume to be the control operator of an amateur station unless documentation to the contrary is in the station records? The station licensee. When, under normal circumstances, may a technician class licensee be in control operator of a station operating in an exclusive amateur extra class operator segment of the amateur bands? At no time. You have to stay within your own band. When using tactical identifiers such as race headquarters during a community service net operation, how often must your station transmit the station's FCC call sign? At the end of each communication and every 10 minutes during the communication. When is an amateur station required to transmit its assigned call sign at least every 10 minutes during and at the end of a communication? Which of the following is acceptable language to use for station identification when operating in a phone sub-band? The English language. What method of call sign identification is required for a station transmitting phone signals? Send the call sign using CW or phone emission. Which of the following formats of a self-assigned indicator is acceptable when identifying using a phone transmission? KL7CC/W3. So these are all examples of acceptable. You can use the slant, the stroke, or the slash when you're operating in another zone. So for example, if I went to Colorado, where my dad lives, even though I'm a KE7, or I'm in the 7 zone, when I go to Colorado, I would say stroke 0. They're in 0 land. Which of the following restrictions apply when a non-licensed person is allowed to speak to a foreign station using the station under the control of a technician class control operator? The foreign station must be one with whom the U.S. has a third-party agreement. What is meant by the term third-party communications? That is a message from a control operator to another amateur station control operator on behalf of another person. Which of the following is a requirement for the issuance of a club station license grant? The club must have at least 4 members. Which of the following is required when making on-the-air test transmissions? Identify the transmitting station. What are the FCC rules regarding the use of a phonetic alphabet for station identification in the amateur radio service? It is encouraged to use phonetic alphabet. And that's the end of Module 8A. So we're down to the last one. Bring that one up. All right. Chapter 8, Lesson Module 8B is on interference, remote and automatic operation, and prohibited transmissions. Interference. QRN or static. Some examples are natural interference such as thunderstorms, or sometimes man-made with appliance and power lines making static. QRM or man-made is usually interference caused by other signals and can also be transmitted signals and can be created internally by a receiver. Harmful interference is interference that is disruptive, not necessarily willful. And deal with it as best you can. Try to avoid causing harmful interference. Willful interference is intentionally causing interference. This becomes a legal issue and law enforcement could be involved. This is rare, and there are procedures to deal with this, such as the ARRL official observers. They can help. Preventing interference. Use common sense and courtesy. Know how to operate your equipment to reduce generated and received interference. No one owns a frequency. Be a good neighbor and share. Have a plan B. Recognize special operations and special circumstances. A control point is where the control operator function is performed, not necessarily at the physical transmitter. Local control is when the operator is directly at the transmitter. Remote control is a control point has a link to the transmitter by a control link, which could be a telephone, radio, or the internet. Automatic control is control functions are operated by circuitry that ensures proper operations. Automatic control. A control operator is always required and is responsible for proper operation. Repeaters, auxiliary stations, space stations, and beacons may operate under automatic control. Repeater users are responsible for their transmissions through a repeater. Prohibited transmissions. Unidentified transmissions, not giving your call sign. False or deceptive signals, such as using someone else's call sign. False distress or emergency signals, such as fake calls for help. Obscene or indecent speech, that's up to interpretation, and you should avoid controversial subjects. I'm going to try my headset because it just said that it's done charging, which is weird. I don't know. I'll investigate that later. I don't know why it's not working. This is a fairly new headset. Okay. You cannot transmit music either, and no commercial communications. Advertising your ham radio gear is okay as long as it's not your regular business. Don't advertise non-ham gear. And you may not use ham radio on behalf of your employer. And one exception is when teachers may use a ham radio in their classrooms, and clubs may employ an operator, but only with restrictions on hours. And no encrypted transmissions. Encryptions means deliberately encoding the information for transmission in order to hide or obscure the message. Encryption is only allowed for radio control, space station control, and no broadcasting is allowed. Broadcasting is sending one-way transmissions to the general public, such as news, music, and there's exceptions. Only code practice is allowed, or ham radio-related bulletins. Retransmission of space station control communications. Special circumstances. Emergencies and critical situations create special circumstances, Special events may qualify as a special circumstance. Normal rules return when a situation returns to normal. All right, practice question time. When is willful interference to other amateur radio stations permitted?
Never.
Never, at no time. Under which of the following circumstances may an amateur radio station make one-way transmissions? When transmitting code practice, information bulletins, transmissions necessary to provide emergency communications. When is it permissible to transmit messages encoded to hide their meaning? Only when transmitting control commands to space stations or radio-controlled craft. Under what conditions is an amateur station authorized to transmit music using a phone emission? When incidental to authorized retransmission of manned spacecraft communication. When may amateur radio operators use their stations to notify other amateurs of the availability of equipment for sale or trade? When the equipment is normally used in an amateur station or such activity is not conducted on a regular basis. What, if any, are the restrictions concerning transmission of language that may be considered indecent or obscene? Any such language is prohibited. What types of amateur stations can automatically retransmit the signals of another amateur station? A repeater, auxiliary, or space stations. In what circumstances may the control operator of an amateur station receive compensation for operating the station? Only when the communication is incidental to the classroom instruction at an educational institution. Under which of the following circumstances are amateur stations authorized to transmit signals related to broadcasting, program production, or news gathering, assuming no other means are available? Only where such communications directly relate to the immediate safety of human life or protection of property. What is the meaning of the term broadcasting in the FCC rules for the amateur radio service? Broadcasting is transmissions intended for reception by the general public. Which of the following is an example of automatic control? That would be the repeater operation. Which of the following is true of remote control operation? That's all of the above. The control operator must be at the control point. A control operator is required at all times, and the control operator indirectly manipulates the controls. What is an example of remote control as defined in Part 97? That is operating the station over the internet, or the phone line, or another radio. Who is accountable should a repeater inadvertently retransmit communications that violates the FCC rules? That will be the control operator of the originating station. How can you join a digital repeaters talk group? By programming your radio with the group's ID or code. Which of the following applies when two stations transmitting on the same frequency interfere with each other? Common courtesy should prevail, but no one has the absolute right to an amateur frequency. That is the end of Module 8B, and that is the end of both chapters 7 and 8. So I'm going to share the link to the, I can put this in the email that I'll send out to, but I'll share it in the chat. So here's the link to ARRL's part 97, and if you want the most updated, go to this link here. Otherwise, they provide the PDF, and the ARRL maintains a copy here. And this is the Consider Frequency Operator Guides. And again, I'll go ahead and share these in the chat and also in the email, because there's other people that aren't making it. So these are the frequencies for different CW areas, RTTY and data. It's a good page to have on file. And then here is the amateur radio bands, and each one of these has the license sections. So E is for extra, A is for advanced, and G is general. So technician is where you guys are going to be. So down here in a T, you can go over and see that 80 meters you only have code privileges. But if you go up to the 6 meters, 2 meters, all of those, you got band privileges up here. And there's the UHF. So this is also one that I'll include in the email and text. So any other questions for 7 and 8? It's kind of regulations that you're just going to have to work through and memorize a few of them, and hopefully should go. Let me stop the share on this.
Jim, I have a question.
Go ahead.
A little more clarification on how we're getting feedback. So turn this down a little bit. Clarification on the conduct of the test with the 3 monitors, 3 or more monitors, if we're doing it on Zoom.
Uh-huh.
Explain the mechanics on that.
So what's going to happen is you'll need to have your cell phone to bring up the meeting, and then you'll have your desktop or laptop, and then what they'll do is you'll go into a Zoom meeting, and there'll be a minimum of 3 VEs that'll be watching you, and then you'll have to take your cell phone with its camera and look around and show, you don't have papers and stuff or your book hanging out. So you'll show it all the way around with your cell phone camera. And then what they're going to have you do is actually set your cell phone so that they can watch you at the same time, and make sure that you don't sneak a paper with answers and stuff on it. And they'll be monitoring you and your video. You'll share the video from your phone and also from your desktop as you answer the questions. But the good thing is you won't have to go out. It'll just be a Zoom meeting. Although that being said, Daniel is trying to work on limited in person. So if you don't feel comfortable with the Zoom stuff, we are trying to get some limited in person things going. For me though, I kind of like the idea of the remote. I mean, I'm perfectly happy. And you'll let me bring that up. There's full information on our Mike and Key website. If you look in the, let me share the screen again. So if you look in the center section of the website, you'll see the commentary by the VE lead, Scott. And he talks about how we're offering Zoom stuff. So if you want to register early, you can go in and register here. But then he also has more information. When you click on this, it'll bring up a Word document that tells you how the requirements and basic requirements that are needed. So you'll have to have a webcam and then also your phone. And he's got all of the instructions on how to set it up and things like that. And also considerations before you register. So that is, I'll share this document in the chat window, and I'll put it in the meeting notes too.
Okay.
And then of course the regular Mike and Key website has where you can go up and register. But I am working with Scott to have everybody get ready to. He's going to work especially with our group to set things up. He's going to check with his other VEs and get a list of people set up so that we can do that with him.
Okay. And the tests are basically generated out of the test pool off of the ARRL site? Or?
Yeah, so the book and the test pool that is in the back of the book in the blue section. Mm-hmm. So what they'll be doing is they'll be generating a random selection of questions, a certain number from each section, like it says in the front of the test area. So there'll be so like sub element T1 has 6 questions out of 6 groups. Sub element T2 has 3 questions out of 3 groups. So each you'll have questions out of each area that'll make up the exam.
Sounds to me like it's pretty much the same as the test, the ARRL trial test for every tape.
Correct.
It's okay.
Yep. And they're exactly the same. If you go to the last couple of emails that I sent, had a couple of sample test questions. That's the same test pool.
Yep.
And then they just randomly gather a few questions from that particular section.
Okay.
Was there a time when we might do this?
I can't hear you very well, Tony.
Yeah, it's really when I talk. I think it's your echo. I'm wondering if there a date we're planning on doing this.
I'm sorry, you're coming in and out.
Sure.
Jim, do you want to turn your volume down?
date where you might be thinking about doing this test?
Oh, so yeah, we don't have a date yet because I'm still working with Scott. It should be the first couple of weeks in March or maybe mid March. But yeah, we're still working with Scott. I talked to him yesterday, or actually Friday, and gave him the heads up. And he's going to start working with his VE team and get them get a couple of dates scheduled for us. Because I told him that the technician class is about 12, 13 people altogether. So he's going to try to get a date set up. And then Daniel was also checking with a couple of places, and I'm not sure where, trying to do in person, but it would be a shorter, smaller group. Because the Gubernata hasn't opened everything up for us yet. Oh, yeah, George and Elaine, I'll convert that into a PDF and send it to you when I do it in the email.
Okay.
Yeah, I noticed that Scott had done that, and I kind of go, "Dope."
Yeah.
I've gotten used to converting everything now into PDFs because it just makes life so much easier. So I will do that. Well, I'm really frustrating. My nice fancy headphone won't even turn on now.
It's a Bose, right?
No, there. I was actually hitting the wrong button. Dope.
Okay.
Rookie. No wonder it won't turn on. You're not hitting the right button. It's too new.
Nope. No, it doesn't.
Yes, can you hear?
It's gone again. It came in. It just tripped in.
We heard you for a bit.
There.
Yes.
There we
Yes.
go. Jeez, what a rookie. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording over here too. I forgot about that.